Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for Destination Ladakh. We have two very fine speakers with us today who are going to be telling us about this fabulous destination. I had the privilege of going around Ladakh a couple of years ago, and I know just what a glorious and mystical place it is. So we're delighted to be able to introduce it to you, or indeed tell you very much about the destination and its sort of conservation success stories in those high Himalayas. I am going to be, there's two parts to it, and I'm sorry to say that Hashim Chabji has not been able to join us today. He's got another technical problem in the destination where he is. So I've had to be replaced by a wonderful man called Surya Ramachandran, well known also in Ladakh, certainly amongst the snow leopards. And so he'll be doing part two of this. So I will introduce part one now. And Vishwas Makhija is a well-known adventurer and character in the adventure sector in India. Runs a wonderful company called India Insight Tours. And I think Ladakh was one of your first great destinations and probably got into the adventure travel world. So we're really delighted to have Vishwas with us today to introduce us to this glorious Himalayan country. So Vishwas, can you take us through and take us on? Thank you.
Thank you, Julian, for this introduction. First of all, Julie to everybody who's plugged in for this call, and thank you for coming by. Yes, I think I got the Ladakh bug way back in '87 as a 17-year-old young man, and I think I'm still young at heart. The mountains keep you always young, I think, and I keep going back every year to this wonderful land, which I think embraced me way back then, 33 years ago, and continues to brace me today. You know? Yes, I think Ladakh is a land of diversity, very rich culture, a great heritage. And I think the most important for any destination are its people. And by far, Ladakh has people with very large hearts, very kind, very humble, very forward-looking, and really do whatever it needs to be done over the years. And I was in Ladakh just recently in February for the Ladakh Winter Conclave, which was organized by the government of Union Territory of Ladakh, the local associations, and it was a big insight into where Ladakh is heading in today's time. We all know that we all gone through a rough patch last 13, 14 months. Still, it looks a little bit tough going forward, but to be honest, what I saw in Leh in February during the Winter Conclave, I mean, everybody's getting together, the local associations, the hotels, the travel associations, the taxi union, and especially the present generation, or I'd say generation next. I have friends who've been there 30 years and now their kids are taking over. And this new generation of new entrepreneurs, or they have entrepreneur blood in them since they've been seeing their parents grow the business, and they really want to take Ladakh to a next level. I think they all need our support. It was an eye-opener in February, the whole way we spent those 5 days in Ladakh. One second. And it seemed that the baton is being moved forward to the people, to this next generation, and I think they will do a great work. Yes. Having said that, Ladakh, as we have seen over the years, when I joined in '87, the business, Ladakh was more of a summer destination. At that point, I think the late '80s, early '90s, 90% or 95% of the business was inbound. And that was good. In several ways. It was still very virgin, a lot of valleys, a lot of treks, a lot of trans-Himalayan drives. But I think Ladakh as all things move ahead in tourism, and the tourists or tourism has its larger implications, then that movie came, actually called The Three Idiots, which just changed the whole scenario of Ladakh. And the whole country finally awoke to a destination called Ladakh, and everybody started going in herds. And that did have a larger effect, I think. Although it did fill up a lot of pockets, it filled up a lot of local hotels, it brought a lot of revenue to everybody in the destination. But I think somewhere down the line, we more or less, people forgot. One second. That we all had to keep in mind how we were going to take care of the environment around us. And that's what was discussed largely when we were there in February, I think. So yes, I think one of the prime objectives, what I need to tell all of you is Ladakh is no more only a summer destination. We all need to work around giving it into almost a 12-month period because there is so much happening in spring, in autumn, in summers, and in the peak of winters. I'm sure Surya will run us down later about what he does in the winters there. But Ladakh is evolving and it is spreading its wings. I would say during the summers, of course, you have a lot of monastery festivals. You have the roads open from Kashmir and from Manali side. So a lot of people drive into Leh and they do various kind of trips. But what is happening in the winters, I think, is a lot of local festivals, I think, which needs to be taken into consideration. The biggest is Losar during late December, early January. Also, I think which is really picking up around the world, I think, is also ice climbing. And Ladakh is turning out to be a very popular destination for ice climbing. There was an ice climbing festival in Nubra this year, and it took in a lot of eyeballs around the world. Similarly, during the summers, there is a famous Sudu bouldering festival or rock climbing festival happening in the Sudu Valley near Kargil. So again, I mean, diversity, there is so much there. Extreme mountain biking coming into Ladakh and spreading its tentacles all over. Well, every destination, of course, has its footprints with arts and crafts, with its cuisine, with its pashmina. I think is another thing which Ladakh is very well known for. We all hear about pashmina around the world, but a lot of this comes from the Changthang Plains, close to Tibet border. It's a cash crop. It's a growing industry there. Just give me a second. I need to get this.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, okay, there I go. So of course, Ladakh, as we know, it's a land of passes, glacier, deserts, and so many more things. It's one destination which surely can leave you spellbound in every aspect. The more important thing is that a lot of culture, despite of, in a way, over tourism, it is still so well intact. And we've been discussing with the local government there that we need to move Ladakh. We need to decompress places like the Indus Valley. We need to decompress Pangong. We need to decompress Somaruri and move tourism into other areas, which are Zanskar and Kargil, and apart also expand more into the lower Ladakh areas of Hemishukbachen or Sham, as we call it. And lately, Zanskar always had its connectivity through Kargil. It used to be a long way drive from Leh to Kargil into Zanskar through Padum. Last year, the road which are being built through Chile is through, and Zanskar is only a day. It's only a 10 hours drive from Leh now. So Leh is the valley. This is the Indus Valley. One of the great shots, I think, which one of my friends took from France here. Yeah, we always say that one has to. Sometimes one needs to look at things from a distant perspective to see the full picture, and that's what Ladakh is. I think it just gives you another high. It gives you another reason to believe in yourself, to believe in travel, to believe in everything you can do in the outdoors. Yes, as you said, it has iconic landmark in the history. It is a very important uh, region on the old Silk Route, and it is so well preserved. As I said, little bit earlier as well. Yes, it's a place where you can really find your peace, tranquility, and silence. You walk into any valley, it is still so virgin. You won't find a soul. You might come across some shepherds who are going there, and I think it's also one of the destinations where, in the present times, as we say, COVID protocols and all those things coming in, you can just be on your own. Your clients can just be on their own while they traverse different valleys or different regions of Ladakh. Yeah, I mean, any picture you take of Ladakh, it's like a picture. It's a coffee table book, and it just leaves you spellbound. I'm sure a lot of people, or the guests here who joined us, have sent clients to Ladakh, or they've been to Ladakh, and they know what I'm talking about here. Talking about, I want to come back to one thing about infrastructure. Ladakh, as we know, has been growing in infrastructure. Leh definitely has a lot of good hotels, as you can find in any big city in India. Also across the regions which are very popular, Pangong, Somoruri, Nubra, plenty of homestays have come up. Also plenty of camps have come up, which are very comfortable for average, I would say, average clients who want to go there. Yes, you just have to be careful sometimes about hygiene levels, which I think our friends in Ladakh are working very hard on these, especially around campsites. And I think we've been stressing a lot to the local communities about, and I think I want to stress to all the people who are here, is to be very sensitive to environment when they send clients to Ladakh. I think it has a very fragile environment. And one of the biggest troubles I think we face in any destination in the Himalayas is the growing plastic use. And I have been an advocate of no single plastic use among our community in ATOI, and we've been following that vigorously with the local community in Ladakh. So my take to everybody here would be that do send clients to Ladakh. People need business, but please sensitize your clients to keep a balance of the local fragile environment. Let them not use single-use plastic bottles. There are alternatives available in the market, like livestock bottles, which I use for myself and for all our clients. And I think we need to leave legacy behind. We need to leave Ladakh as pristine as possibly it was 40 years ago. Yes, I mean, this is one shot which I think which is from Amure Plains, very close to Pang, and I think the caption is just to right. It says, "Look deep into Indonesia, and then you will understand it better." This is one of my favorite, I think, shots. As I was saying about the art and craft, these piraks which the ladies wear, the costumes, the dress. Another thing what is happening in Ladakh is with these new entrepreneurs, what is coming forward is a lot of Ladakhi textiles. There are these local designers who are really taking the Ladakhi textiles to the world. One of the local designers, a girl called Sonam, she did her first show at the Lakme Fashion Week last year. And apparently she's heading to Europe soon to bring the Ladakhi costume and culture to another level, I think. Yes, of course, it has its unmatched beauty, unlimited adventures, and high passes. And here you see these kids playing a game of cricket. I'm sure this is not an IPL game, but I'm sure in coming times, we should have some more interesting things happening in Ladakh on the IPL front, I guess. We always say these travel to see beautiful places, to meet beautiful souls. And truly, as I said right in the beginning, Ladakh has some of the most beautiful souls and human beings. Some of my closest friends come from there. There are one people, I think, if you reach out to them, they will go all out to help. anybody who steps foot there or still hasn't been there, they're very, very reachable. They're very open. They're very willing to lend the extra hand in every possible way. Coming back to the clients who we send to Ladakh, I would say that we should create, all of us as a community should create some SOPs, which we should hand over to every client that they need to follow while they are not in Ladakh, but anywhere in the Himalayas, so that we could protect our environment there. And I would say have it signed. It'll be a good way, responsible way of carrying things forward. I touched earlier, the greatness of any culture, of course, is the festivals, and Ladakh has festivals almost during every month in different monasteries, whether they're in Indus Valley, whether it is in Nubra, whether it is in Zanskar. So, I mean, when we were there in February, we had the festival at the Stoke Palace, and it was absolutely stunning. So every month there's a festival happening. So one can always create programs around festivals. So it's an added advantage to clients. Yes, of course, it's a journey into religious and folk traditions, and there are ample in this part of the world. It's like one world, one region and many worlds put together. Nothing better than Ladakh and being on a trek and sleeping under the galaxy of stars. Ladakh can also be promoted, since I talk about stars, for astro journeys. That's a new product they're also trying to launch. Our friends in Leh. So if you have clients who are looking for astro journeys, Ladakh is a destination to go for. There is an observatory called Handle, which is about 7 hours from Leh, which is being developed for astro tourism. There are some local issues which we are trying to sort out with the administration. But yes, being in nature in Ladakh, under the stars, there's nothing like it. Yes, kindness is like snow, it beautifies everything it covers. I think that's what I think humanity needs to be as well, you know. Yes, I think it's again coming back to my slides, coming back to the people all the time, and that's what it is. Yes, during the Central Asian trade routes, yes, people stayed back, civilizations evolved, and yes, I think they left is some of the most kindest people on Mother Earth. I always say, take nothing but pictures, leave nothing but footprints, kill nothing but time. And that's what I think you need to do in Ladakh. Kill your time, and you will always fall short of time when you look around the beauty of Ladakh. Well, culinary delights in the cold desert. I was there recently in February, and we were invited to somebody's house for a dinner on the last evening in Shea Village. And I must tell you, it was one of the most delightful meals to be in a local house hosted. They have a great variety. I mean, we always hear about thuppa and momos. I think some of you can agree to that, but there is much more than thuppa and momos, what you get in Ladakh. This is on the summit of Stoke Kangri, one of the trekking peaks, which is now closed again. Interestingly, this peak was closed because of water being polluted by people setting up base camps of Stoke Kangri, and the village community got together and they took a decision of closing the mountain for climbing for 3 years. And I don't think so. And this is one of our last clients who went up that mountain 2 years ago. I think this is where we have to be careful on. We have to ensure that we protect the local communities. We have to ensure responsibility towards the environment, because Ladakh has its water scarcity, Ladakh has its water problems. And we have to preserve, we have to not get into this over-tourism mode, or I would use the word yatra tourism or yatra trekking, as has been happening in the last couple of years in the Himalayas, because our environment is too fragile. And I'm glad the friends in Ladakh took some very strong steps to get this back into control. Yes, when you go to a magical place, Ladakh, to that region or any valley in Ladakh, your feet should be dirty, messy, and your eyes sparkling. And there is no way that you can't come back sparkling from Ladakh. It's one destination where I think I have set foot in '87 for the first time. And I keep going back every year and again. Every time I'm there, it's like, wow. I mean, it just doesn't, it always blows me away with its sanity of the place it is. Well, I didn't introduce myself in a proper way. Here I'm in the capacity of being the president of Adventure Tour Operators Association of India. I also wear a hat of running an India and Side Tours as an adventure travel company, which I started in 1996. I'm happy to take any questions if anybody would have. So thank you.
Thank you, Vishwas. That was wonderful and fantastic photographs. So you can understand from that just what a magical place it is. And like you and like us at TOFTigers, we're really keen to try and preserve that magic. Now I'm going to introduce to the next part of this, I'm going to introduce Surya Ramachandran. As I mentioned, he's going to talk very much about the high Himalayas, the territory of snow leopards, but of course a lot of other wildlife. He spent 5 years up there. He's an incredibly knowledgeable naturalist, wonderful man to be with on trips, and has been stationed up in Ulay for about the last 5 years. He's a great photographer, so delighted to see some of his photographs very shortly. But Surya also, he produces field guides, amazing field guides, and of course one of them that's going to be coming out is to the high Himalayas, the trans Himalayas as he might call it, and that's going to be coming out soon. But let's go to Surya. And Surya, thank you for talking about the high Himalayas, even higher than parts that we've seen already. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Julian. I hope I'm audible to all of you. Thank you for having me, Julian, firstly. It's quite strange for me to be talking about Ladakh because I'm currently in Jaisalmer in 50 degrees heat and looking for reptiles in the sand dunes. And talking about Ladakh from here is seriously, it's a first time thing that's happened for me, and it brings back a lot of beautiful memories of the place. And thank you, Mr. Makhija, for putting it together so beautifully about the story of Ladakh, its people, the languages, the culture, the history. It's been fantastic. I'm going to be touching on a very small aspect of Ladakh, which is basically my focus area, which is regards to wilderness, tourism, and conservation. That's pretty much what I'm going to be talking about. So we saw also the beautiful pictures put together by Mr. Makhija. And that is what everyone knows Ladakh as, these broad valleys, beautiful monasteries located on hilltops, pastel-hued mountains, lovely people, beautiful festivals. For someone from Chennai like me, when I went there the first time, it felt like I'm going to a foreign land, despite the fact that it's within India. In fact, historically, the northern boundaries of India have always been considered to be the Himalayas. And this is the sliver of Tibet, which has come into the Indian territory for different reasons. And it is a truly magical land, as the topic of today's talk mentions. So it's been an absolutely brilliant journey for me the last 5 years, thanks to the people I work with, like David Sonam, Hashim Taibji, who was supposed to be here. I've got to see a lot of the place, a lot of wildlife. I got to go to some very remote villages where there is a lot of wildlife, but like Mr. Makhija said, the spread of tourism hasn't reached those areas yet. So there is a lot of potential in Ladakh. There's a lot happening, but to get to this stage, there's been about two to 3 decades of work that's been put in, especially with regards to this animal. So this is, of course, as it's popularly known, the gray ghost of the Himalayas, the snow leopard. So you get these cats above 3,500 meters. Sometimes they've been recorded even lower. And this has been my main focus area in my time in Ladakh. But we also got to work with these beautiful animals in Dras and Kargil, the Himalayan brown bears, which again is a different time of the year because these bears hibernate in the winters when the snow leopard season is. And from April to November, they roam the grassy slopes around Dras and Kargil and Suru Valley in Western Ladakh. Another Probably my favorite animal from the region, probably the most persecuted of the lot, is the Tibetan wolf. But since we have a very short duration today, I'm not going to be delving deep into each animal and its conservation problems, but I'm going to try to put together a broader picture of the whole conservation story of Ladakh. So Ladakh, as Julian was mentioning, is the Trans-Himalaya. So this line of white, of course, as we all know, is the Himalayas. And usually when I talk about wildlife, I talk about green jungles and vast, large rivers and mountain slopes covered with bird sound. But interestingly, this time I'm talking about this brown piece of land, which is there beyond the Himalayas. So it's a very, very different place, a place which has been brought about by heavy tectonic activity 35 million years ago. And it's a place which is evolving even today geologically as the Indian landmass pushes further into the Asian landmass. So it's a very shriveled landscape. It's very Martian in many ways. And to put it, as a lot of guests have said on day one, it feels lifeless. But the truth is, there is a lot of life here. In fact, the most obvious thing is, of course, the people and how they've adapted to this unforgiving environment. They have these beautiful small villages in mountain valleys. Usually the criteria would be a proximity to a water source or a pasture land. And most of these villages, as we saw in most of Mr. Makhija's pictures, will have a beautiful monastery. May not be as grand as Tikse or Hemis Gompa, but they will have a unique and an interesting monastery which overlooks the village. And the people lead a very simple life. Most of their farming is done in the summers, but throughout the year, they have their flock of sheep and yak, and that is their main source of income, sometimes for pashmina wool, sometimes with dairy, and they usually live a very self-sustained lifestyle. So like the people, the wildlife is also adapted to this incredibly extreme environment. So this is a view of Ladakh in the summers in the mountains near, if I remember right, near Hinaskut. So this is a view of Ladakh in the summers, and this is Ladakh in the winters. So you can see it's very extreme and still very dry, which is why it's called a cold desert. It doesn't have the wetness that the Himalayas has, because most of the precipitation and the wet clouds are stopped by the high Himalayan peaks. So the Trans-Himalaya is essentially a cold desert which feels lifeless. But the reason it feels lifeless is because the animals have adapted so well to this environment. So in this picture, we have, as you can see right in the middle, there are two snow leopards, two males, which were coming down to a carcass. And despite the fact that it's a treeless environment, we can see how beautifully they blend in. And this is true not just for the snow leopards, but even for most other wildlife. They have evolved beautifully to blend into the landscape. And if not for the keen eye of the locals, and if not for the fact that they accompany you on these wildlife trips, it can be very difficult to look for wildlife in this region. And this is true not just for snow leopards or brown bears or burrell sheep, as you see here, but it's true even for the Apollo butterflies or the snakes that come out in the summers or the small pikas to the birds. So everything in Ladakh, you really need to train your eye to it. So Ladakh, as we know it, was 95,000 square kilometer roughly, if I remember right. But after the accession of Aksai Chin by the Chinese forces in 1962, we have about 68,000 square kilometers in Ladakh, with a population density of less than 3 people per square kilometer. So that is essentially Ladakh. But there was no protected area for wildlife in Ladakh till the 80s, when Hemis National Park, which is interestingly the largest national park in the country, was set up in the 80s. And this was set up to preserve the snow leopard and its environment. But unlike the rest of the country, by setting up a tiger reserve, we protect the tigers. The story here is very different, because the landscape is a very smooth mosaic between villages, mountains, valleys, and wildlife. And the boundaries in most cases are very porous. And as you can see in this picture, this is a village of Kanji, which is in central Ladakh. And here you can see that the cattle and the sheep and the goats and the yak are kept in open corrals, usually to protect them from the wind and keep them indoors at night. So one of the biggest problems for Ladakh on the local people was conflict with snow leopards and wolves. So there was a lot of retaliatory killing despite the best interests of the people. Most of them are love their wildlife, they revere them. But when your bread and butter, which is sometimes 40 to 50 sheep get killed in one night if a snow leopard gets into the pen. So it is a big loss for a farmer in the remote mountains of Ladakh. And as we can imagine, the compensation schemes sometimes take months to process, by which time the farmers already spent a lot of time visiting different official bodies to get it processed. So this was a big challenge. And another big challenge was, unlike the tiger, these animals, these snow leopards, were not easy to access or understand. So firstly, to solve the problem, there needed to be an understanding of the carnivore, which was roaming these landscapes, which was very minimal, to be honest, in the 80s and 90s. I mean, there were studies done by George Schaller, there were studies done in Rumbak, Hemis National Park by Dr. Ramchandran. All of them brought a lot of clarity. But this person here, Rinchen Wangchuk, the late founding director of Snow Leopard Conservancy India Trust, took it upon himself and his organization to really study the snow leopards that were living in the national park area. So Rumbak was a study area, and they spent a lot of time trying to understand where these cats move, how many cats are there, what are the family dynamics, where are they roaming, are they in the valleys, are they in the mountains, do they roam at day, do they roam at night? There were so many unanswered questions. And most of the questions were answered by setting up well-planned camera traps, climbing the ridges every day to check the camera traps, understanding the different snow leopards that were there in the area, studying their droppings to see what they were feeding on at different times of the year. So there was a whole lot of studies that were done. And these studies revealed a very interesting world of the snow leopard, which is also the reason why we have tourism and a genuine possibility of seeing a snow leopard in Ladakh today. So in this process, Dr. Rinchen, being a local, was able to gather all the support of the local communities there and use their insights, use their keen eye to study and understand these cats. So in the process, what happened was all these local people became participants in this study and conservation process. So they honed the skills to find snow leopards, and being intrinsically cheerful people, slowly the program of homestays was introduced, where they hosted these wildlife enthusiasts who come from all over the world, and they take them out from their houses to look for snow leopards in Hemis National Park. So this was a hugely successful program, the one that won many awards. In fact, there was so much thought put into it that they even made small dolls using yak and sheep wool to augment their income. So this is actually one of the best souvenirs to get from Ladakh, because it is made by the locals. The money goes straight into the local community when you buy one of these. So all of these training was provided by the Snow Leopard Conservancy. The people benefited from it, and slowly the money started pouring into the local communities, and the conflict wasn't all that much. But we have to remember that this was all restricted to the Rumbak or the Hemis National Park area for a very long time, because as we all generally understand, wildlife tourism, wildlife viewing is always best in the national park. In fact, one of the biggest contributors to the forest department there was the Swarovski optic brand, and they gave in their optics to help the locals study and observe snow leopards better. So this was a huge step, and probably one of the biggest investments made by an optic company in a foreign land to support conservation. So Swarovski played a big role in this. And as we can see, we had people from all over the world flocking to Ladakh in the winter months to get a view of these beautiful cats. And the locals, as they did it year after year, they became absolute experts in finding these cats. I mean, for those of you who have come to Ladakh with me or with other organizations that do snow leopard tours, every time you see one, it's amazing to see the cat. But what is more amazing is how the locals find it. It is truly a magic trick is what they do every single time they find a snow leopard for us. But as I was saying just a minute ago, all of this was restricted to Rumbak area and Hemis National Park for a very long time. And there was a need to spread the snow leopard tourism, or the benefits of snow leopard tourism, to other areas. And we have to remember that Ladakh is a vast area with a very low population density. So essentially, it's one big national park or wildlife sanctuary. So it was not very hard for people, the Snow Leopard Conservancy, to find other areas, and even local people moved to other areas and spread snow leopard tourism to different valleys. In fact, now we have 3 to 4 different destinations in Ladakh where you can actually see snow leopards outside the national park. And even there in such areas, the spotters were trained by the Snow Leopard Conservancy. They became stars in their own right. Road networks became fantastic in Ladakh, which made it possible to access remote valleys, even get into the heart of snow leopard habitat. And in fact, this made it possible for a lot of people who are daunted by the fact of going to 4,000 meters in winter. It made it a lot easier for them to access Ladakh in these harsh times. So this is our place in Ladakh, the Snow Leopard Lodge, which came up from one such homestay in the Ule area. And we believed we wanted to work in areas outside the protected area. And we set up Snow Leopard Lodge as a slow, gradual process from 2012 onwards till now. And now it is owned and run by the local communities as it should be. And we just run it for them as a company which provides guests and training. So this is Snow Leopard Lodge, which is where we are. And lodges like this and setups like this are popping up in different valleys and spreading the benefits of snow leopard tourism into other areas of Ladakh as well. So this is just to give you an example of all these people as they arrive photographing a snow leopard from the parking lot at Uday. It's quite unimaginable for people who worked in the landscape in the 80s and 90s, because it is one of those things where if you see a snow leopard, someone wrote a whole book about it. And now it's a totally different thing to see a snow leopard in Ladakh. So what happened? What are the other benefits of the snow leopard tourism, the money which it brought in and the confidence it brought in amongst the local people? So certain valleys were designated for wildlife, for grazing. So they stopped taking their sheep and yak into certain valleys to make sure the wild animals get their due. So this is all the kickbacks which we don't document of snow leopard tourism. And one of the biggest benefits of snow leopard tourism was the fact that the urial, which is found only along the Indus and the Shyok valleys, was brought back from the brink of extinction. Because of all the development along these two rivers, the roads and the cities coming up, the urial, which is endemic only to this area, was the worst affected. But as wilderness tourism improved, awareness increased among local communities. And along with the army and the researchers and Snow Leopard Conservancy, the urial has been brought back from the brink of extinction. I mean, there was a theory that it could have been extinct in the 90s if things had been left unchecked. And of course, the biodiversity was brought back into areas where it was originally lost. People started studying, documenting bird life, butterflies, reptiles in Ladakh. All of this adds to different aspects of conservation in the region. But I'd like to give you one interesting thing that I noticed in the last 3 years. What happened was, in outside protected areas, snow leopards were regularly taking livestock, as I mentioned earlier. And because of the benefits of tourism, livestock predation did not bother the locals. So they were happy that they were getting compensation from the government and from the people who came to see snow leopards. And they didn't care as much when their livestock was being taken. But this created a different kind of problem. Was the benefits of snow leopard tourism changing the lives of the locals? Were they losing their way or how they lived in the past years? So a solution was needed, and Snow Leopard Conservancy, along with other bodies, brought in a very simple solution. Most of the predation by snow leopards was happening inside the corrals, and that is because the corrals weren't covered. A simple thought of providing the villagers a wire mesh and some wood to build this without building it for them, so that they become half the investor for their own protection and the other half and the support was provided by the Conservancy. What this did was it reduced, if you can imagine this, 95% of the conflict. And snow leopards went back to hunting wild prey, because there was wild prey, but it was just an easier target to get to the livestock. So now simple tweaks like this, it's conservation tourism, and conservation is always about adapting. It's an evolving process. And a small shift in the mindset like this, or the application of a small tweak, like what we just heard, can go a long way in making the whole process very meaningful. So we've been talking about snow leopards. We spoke a little bit about brown bears and wolves, but there's many such iconic species in different parts of Ladakh. The otters of the Indus Valley, the Pallas's cats in Hanle, the black-necked cranes that breed in the high-altitude marshes, the Eurasian lynx, which we know very little about, which is found in Nubra and parts of Zanskar and parts of Hemis National Park. We don't know anything about these animals in Ladakh, and we know that they're being regularly persecuted because for some strange reason, people seem to be okay with snow leopards now, but the persecution felt by these animals and wolves and brown bears still hasn't changed much. So we have a long way to go to tackle the different conservation issues in different parts of Ladakh. It is not one region, but it's many people, many different regions, each with their own problems. And we also, of course, have the borders with China and Pakistan, which cross-border conservation has always been a difficult task world over. The Chiru migration has been hampered big time by erection of fences and battle lines. The feral dog problem, I mean, everyone, even my friends who go to Ladakh say, oh, these bushy dogs, especially the ones from Chennai, my friends, when they go there, they don't realize that the dogs are spreading everywhere. There is food availability because of a lack of good waste disposal systems. Army camps become hubs for dogs, hotels become hubs for dogs. And suddenly in the winters, when the tourism stops, at least the majority of the tourism stops, the dogs start looking for other sources to fend themselves. And what happens is their numbers increase, they hunt wildlife, they hunt urial, they hunt kiang. And this documentation, and this animal is called a kipshang by the local community. It's a wolf dog cross. And I've been seeing more of these than pure wolves in Ladakh, and which is a very, very alarming situation, because we don't know whether we're going to see wolves in the near future, especially a lot of persecution, killing of wolves is happening. And the few wolves that are left are mating with dogs, and this cross is coming across, and we are losing the pure DNA of the Himalayan wolf. So there is multiple layers of conservation problems in Ladakh still to be tackled. But having said that, we have come a long way, but there is a long way to go. It's not a process which only the locals can do, or the NGOs or the forest department. It involves everyone. It involves all of you who are listening. It's about how you perceive the destination, how you sell it to your guests, how you can contribute every time someone goes over there. A lot of these factors come together in hoping for a beautiful future for this trans-Himalayan landscape. Thank you so much.
Surya, that is fantastic. Really fabulous talk, and wonderful to bring in the issues associated, like Vishwas did in the high Himalayas of the great things that are happening, but also the issues that directly result from that, and the sort of conflicts that they face in these areas. But lovely to see a broad plethora of wildlife that these Himalayan areas offer. So really fantastic presentation, really two presentations, both really good to see and really interesting. So huge thanks.